Welcome to the Heroes of the Heart podcast. I'm Steve Garvin, the story architect, and I am joined today by Dawna Campbell. Dawna Campbell is a coach who empowers heart-centered entrepreneurs to create instantaneous results to gain infinite prosperity. She is a #1 international best-selling author of Financially Fit, Living the Secrets to an Abundant and Prosperous Life, and has shared the stages with Mark Victor Hansen and Sharon Lechter. She's also been featured on Fox News, NBC, Yahoo Finance, and Roku TV. Welcome to Heroes of the Heart, Dawna. It's a pleasure to have you.
And thank you so much for having me here with you today, Steve. I'm really excited.
Me too. I have been following you a little bit, and we come from somewhat similar backgrounds of finance and trying to navigate that space. And I look forward to hearing more of your thoughts on how do we tap into our heart in order to become more financially fit.
Right. Absolutely.
And I'm curious for our audience, how do you define financially fit? Because from what I have heard or read, you define it a little bit differently than many people do.
Yes. And that is only my own result of my own experiences, because when I was younger, I grew up in Silicon Valley. We were near the poverty line. So that meant welfare, food stamps, the next door neighbor's dumpster dived for food to bring over to my house. That's what I mean by poverty. And what that really did for me was not only did I get my first job at 14, but I really thought about how I could create opportunities for myself as well as for other people and their children, like sending their children to college, for example. So I became a financial advisor. And at the height of my career, I was responsible for $500 million of other people's money. Well, what ended up returning back to me was I wasn't able to digest food for 2 years. Western medicine was not able to figure out what was wrong. So I went and found a natural healer, a naturopathic doctor who did Chinese medicine. And that's when I learned I couldn't digest food. And what she said to me, that there was something in the outside of your life that you weren't able to digest. Well, I quickly learned that was the infidelity of my marriage that I was unaware of. So I left. And then during the global recession, I took a year off to study meditation and brainwave patterns and science and physics and what all of this has to do, because I was the connecting piece. And when I went to re-enter the workforce in the financial world, nobody was hiring. And I was left financially devastated, following all of the money rules, being a single parent of 2 children. And that was when I knew financial fitness was something different. It wasn't about investments and stocks and bonds and insurance. And one of the things I saw was that all healing is a matter of the heart, including your finances. So for me, financially fit, to truly be financially fit, it's aligning what's in your heart space with what you're thinking in the mind space. And then you get instant results, because our thoughts create our reality, but that reality, the conscious reality, might only be 10%. So it's really understanding how things are working on the inside in order to affect change on the outside.
That's beautiful. And also, I can relate, although my neighbors never went dumpster diving to feed us.
Right.
I can relate to much of what else you're talking about, in that, my family my mother came from the rich side of Los Angeles. My dad came from the poor side of the Depression and lived all over the place, and made for an interesting marriage. But there was a lot of stuff going on externally and I was very out of awareness of how much was going on internally that was generating that external drama that was being created. And I love the way that you mentioned that, that when you looked at your life, that you were at the center of all of it.
Yes.
Right. That it wasn't something external, even though as a corporate accountant, and I imagine as a financial advisor, you look at things that are out there, not so much things that are in here, right? And it's like, what are the numbers telling me? And in the place where I worked, and one of the reasons that it became such a caustic environment for me was that emotions were not welcome in the workplace. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to measure it. We don't want to improve them. We just, leave that at home and let's deal with the numbers here.
Right. But numbers and math and money, especially money, is highly emotional, because money is emotional. And it's not by itself, it's not going to do anything. When you look at it, it's just just numbers, but it always plays off of the energy that you are feeling, or the feelings and emotions that are happening on the inside, which is how the outside world of money, which is also energy, returns to you. So money is highly emotional in that.
It is. And that's one of the things that both surprised me, because I was a very cerebral person. I was really good with numbers. I was really good at making technology work for me. And I thought, because I had those skills, and society was saying, you grew up in Silicon Valley, which, huge industries came because people were good at putting numbers and technology together in a way that worked. Only if we don't work on our internal operating system, then the external results don't manifest in the way that we would like them to manifest.
Correct. Very correct. Because your thoughts create your reality. And it's really how the brain works and the subconscious. And you're absolutely right. Your brain is like the fastest supercomputer out there. And it's like a software program for the body. And if you don't upgrade the software program, you're not going to get out of DOS to get into whatever the new programs are. I don't even know the new technology languages anymore to what they are, because it's all changed. And you can see where I started. We started back in the DOS days in Silicon Valley. And so what happens? Nikola Tesla said this the best way. If you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. So you are energy, your thoughts and emotions are vibration and frequency. So your subconscious, your brain, records everything from the moment you're born to the day you exit this earth. And it's constantly assigning the feelings and emotions, the vibrations and the frequencies to those literal events. Well, it gives us an operating system, and the subconscious creates a mind loop pattern. So when A happens, B happens. They're automated responses, and it creates a mind loop tape. Well, if we don't upgrade that, we get stuck in the past. So you might have, watched your parents, like me growing up, money was an embarrassment. And then I saw and felt the frustration that went with it. So as I got older, that was my old operating system in my brain. And as I got older, guess what happened? Money was an embarrassment, and I always had frustration around it. And I didn't know where that program came from. So by understanding the feelings and emotions, when it creates that awareness, you can find the event that gets associated with it. And because every frequency, every emotion exists in the moment, you can reprogram the event to a different frequency. Now, the events stay the same, but the outcome changes, and it's different because you gave it new instructions. And so that's what I do for myself. That's what I do for people, whether it's in the coaching healing sessions, maybe it's through the Financially Fit program, but I teach how to actually do that and update that part of your software system.
That makes a lot of sense. And like I said, my background is in corporate accounting, but I sat between, literally, or at least figuratively, I sat between the accounting department and the IT department. And I was the bridge to make sense between the two areas. So I'm thinking about, first of all, much of programming revolves around the loops that are created. And when you have a bad line of code, it can totally, one, you can get into an endless loop where you keep experiencing the same thing over and over again, right?
Yes.
And you're like, what the heck is going on? And until you debug it, until you figure out what's going on and correct that line of code, then you'll continue to get the results that you do not want rather than the results that you do want.
Exactly. Exactly. And
And
it's all based on how you feel in the moment, which we don't realize 90% of the time.
well, and one of the things that's interesting about that, again, for me, going back into that time, I was very out of tune with how I was feeling in the moment. I was severely depressed and I didn't even know it. I had a doctor that had to tell me, okay, dude, you're depressed. And I'm like, what, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's absolutely true. Most of us are completely unaware. Albert Einstein, they measured his brain and his awareness level was 10%. So what's the other 90% doing, right? Well, I'm not Einstein and I'm like, am I even close to 10% to have that awareness? And we're just not aware of how we feel each and every moment because it's so subtle. And when we don't pay attention, we get those little red flags, and then those red flags build up and build up and build up. And the next thing you know, you might have a physical ailment, or because all of those emotions will eventually form density in the body. And then it's like, how did I get here? And how did this happen? Well, it's that emotional state that got so wrapped up that we didn't pay attention to, that when we shifted that, or when we don't shift it and change it, it will cause a physical ailment, which is exactly what happened to me in the financial world. I was completely unaware of how I felt in the moment of everything. And what came out with all of it was the amount of anger that I was holding on to, but I didn't know why I was angry. But then when I learned of my husband's infidelity, my world made sense. And I couldn't digest food because I was digesting anger instead. But I didn't know I was angry. And and you don't know. And that's why doctors couldn't find it, was because it wasn't a physical cause, it was an emotional cause.
And I find that interesting, fascinating, really, how there is a part of us that can be aware of things that our conscious mind, if you will, isn't aware. That you knew that there was infidelity happening in your marriage, even though it sounds like, you never had a discussion about it. You
just turn a blind eye and you just go on and you don't pay attention.
Yeah. It's like, walking around with blinders on.
Yeah, very true.
And how often do we do that? How often do we do that with our money? How often do we do that with our emotions? How often do we do with the other energy areas of our life?
Yes, a lot.
And then wonder why we're experiencing dis-ease and illness and frustration.
Right. And that's exactly what happened to me that triggered everything. And it was when that naturopathic doctor said to me, she goes, well, in Chinese medicine, because you can't digest food on the inside, there's something in your life that you can't digest in the outside world. She goes, don't go looking for it. It's going to surface, because as you heal, that's what happens. It comes up. And that's what came up for me. What was interesting about that was I chose to leave the marriage and everything. It took me several months, but I didn't even know that I was angry until several months later, after all of that was over with. I had been trying to release the excess weight off of my body, and I wasn't getting anywhere. I was going to the gym. I was working out 5-6 days a week. I counted calories, I kept food logs, and nothing, no changes. And a year later, changed gyms, changed diets, changed trainers. Another 6 months, nothing. This surfaces. I leave the marriage, and a few months later, I realize I'm happy. And I want brownies for dinner, so I'm going to eat brownies because I don't care. I'm happy. And it was about 3 months later that my assistant said, Dawna, you need to go get some new clothes. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, look behind you. And I look and I have on my business suit and it's just hanging off of my body. I did not even realize that I lost 40 pounds in 3 months at the time, because I was just not in tune. And when I really started thinking about it, I realized the only thing that changed during that time, besides me quitting going to the gym and exercising and eating correctly, was I was happy and I wasn't angry anymore. And that's what emotions do to us in our bodies. And it works financially, with your health, with your mental state, everything. It affects all of you. And the awareness is the key.
That's a great example in that by letting go of the anger, which can be a really heavy emotion, it can be something that really weighs us down. By letting go of that internal anger, that you had external outcomes that manifested, that you lost 40 pounds, which is remarkable in 3 months. And, you're not doing the same types of regimen that you had been doing previously. It was all mindset change.
Yes, it was. It was. And it was I was feeding myself in a different emotion, and it had a physical effect on my body. Now, it probably took a couple of years to get all of that weight on and with all of it and all of the anger. But when it came off and I fed myself a lighter, higher vibration, then it literally came off of my body, because the density of happiness is not the same density as anger. And you can measure those energies and how it works with the energy field with science and physics and things. But it just has a whole different feeling. Happiness is a lot lighter than anger, and it has a physical weight to it.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of a quote that I saw today that said, by that wellness is something that happens little by little, and therefore it is not something little, or to that effect. That that the changes that we make in our lives, the emotional changes, the financial changes, whatever, oftentimes don't come in a weekend or a fast or something. Those things can contribute, but it's little by little that we make the changes to get to where it is we want to go. And that where we want to go is something that's dramatic, because there are a lot of little things that led up to that point.
Absolutely. It's about being consistent, and that consistency also. So for me with exercise, I do exercise to this day. I keep track of my steps and different measurements and things like that, but it's not I have to, it's I want to, because when I physically move, the energy physically moves with me, and it creates more space within my body to create what I truly want to create. But it's the consistency. So I will walk 20 minutes a day, a minimum of a set time where I walk. And if it's not nice outside, I go downstairs on the treadmill. But it's the consistency over time that my body is changing, and it's becoming more toned, but I'm happier and it doesn't take a lot. It's just the consistency every day with what you're doing, because it shows the universe you are doing this new pattern.
Yes. And one of the things that I hear in you saying that is that you're doing things for your body, not to your body.
Exactly.
That it's an expression of love and appreciation for the physical vehicle that you've been given to manifest in this world.
Absolutely. It's all about.
Whereas a lot of times we look at diet and exercise and so forth as something that I've got to do because my body is not acceptable, or I need to change my story, and so I'm going to do things to it in order to get the results that I want. But that's not coming from a place of love. That's not coming from a place of peace and happiness. And so if we change that, if we reorient our mindset, then we can experience all the joys of going on a walk, of being on the treadmill, or for me, going up in the mountains here and going for a hike.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can, well, I love to be outside. So put me outside, I'll do all kinds of things. But yes, even on the treadmill, in order to do that, I have to turn on some music and some things to get myself going, because it's a mindset. Absolutely. But have me go outside and walk. Yes. Is the sun out? Absolutely. So it's really about how you show yourself love. And I've paid attention to how my body feels and how I feel before and after exercising, and during, and how it shifts and changes my mindset. And just getting up and physically moving, you get a lot more focus, clarity, and balance, and the energy is not stagnant inside. So when we want to create or have more abundance in our life, or we have more energy to do that with, so it can attract back more from the universe To you, it's all based on physics because you're not stagnant, you're not stuck in it's moving inside. So definitely you become more of a powerful creator and manifester.
Yes. And I love that idea of, honoring the energy within us. I did a short little YouTube workout with Patricia Moreno this morning, and she had a program. She has recently passed away, called Intensati. And it was all about what she does is integrates both kind of language. So while we're doing these exercises and so forth, we're talking about I'm rich and and I'm feeling great. But it connects the heart and the mind. Boy, I did that backwards. The heart and the mind and the body, so that energy that we're creating, that we're utilizing, is productive and produces the results we want to be producing. And I think it's awesome that, how do we manage that energy? How do we become more conscious of it?
And for me, and I've said this, it's all about the awareness. So how do you create that awareness? One of the things that I talk about and share as one of the tips is I have people take out their phone and set a timer on their phone, not for like the top of the hour or quarter after, but some weird time, like, 4 hours and, 27 minutes or something like that, for whatever time you are at now. So it's not 3:30 in the afternoon because you'll start thinking about it, but in whatever 4 hours and 27 minutes is from this moment. And then when that timer goes off, what you do is you just stop everything that you're doing and assess how you feel. And ask yourself, close your eyes, take a breath, and see how you feel. Because if you're in a happy, joyful state, keep going. But if you're not, you can change that. And one of the things that you can do really simply is just this breathing exercise that I share. When we breathe in the oxygen and all of the good things that the body needs. And when we breathe out the carbon dioxide, all the toxins and the things that we don't need. So if your timer goes off and you realize that you have stress and there's worry and there's pressure, you're going to stop. You're going to breathe in the quality that you do want, say peace. So you breathe in peace, breathe out stress, and do that for 2, 3, 4 minutes. And your body will create that physiological change, put you back in that peaceful state. It'll alter the brainwave patterns. And then the stress will start to leave the body, which then it gives you more focus, clarity, and balance. You go back to your task at hand. And the next thing you know, you finished it faster than you could blink because you were actually in a heightened state of consciousness and awareness because of how your brainwave patterns work. So that's a real simple physiological change that you can do. Now, it's not a permanent change of like upgrading the software system. You'd have to go in and reprogram, as we talked about earlier, but that's something you can do in the moment and understand that awareness of how you truly feel. And then when you do that and set the timer a couple of times a day, you'll really start paying attention to how you feel when that happens.
Absolutely. And one of the things I love about that is, one, the simplicity of it, but also, when we just check in, it's kind of like looking at our, bank balance. We never pay attention to what's in our financial bank, then, all kinds of things can happen and we're unaware of it. Similarly, what's happening in our emotional bank, if we never tune into that, we've never checked the balance in there, then, all kinds of things can happen. We can get severely depressed, we can have digestive issues, we can have all kinds of things happening, and we're not conscious of them because we never took the time to be present with what is happening in the moment. Another thing that I love about that is meditation is how I begin pretty much every day. I love that, just meditating for a couple of minutes, as you develop that practice, that it becomes a stronger muscle, such that, when I find myself feeling emotionally distressed, I can just notice that I'm feeling emotionally distressed, literally take a couple of breaths and change that state from distress to ease. And it's almost instantaneous.
Yes, absolutely. And I have found that For me, I take a lot of opportunities with transition times.
Mm,
So if I'm in the car and I get home before I jump out of the car and bring everything in, I stop and I take 30 seconds to a minute, refocus, regroup. So when I walk in, I'm in the right state of mind to what's going on within the house, whatever I had been thinking about in the car, all of it. And it was one of the things that I learned with my children. Every time we were going from one thing to another, there was always a transition time.
mm,
And if you take that moment in the transition time, it resets you for the next one.
mm.
Um, and so, you might finish the podcast and then I take a few moments of a transition time before I go on to the next activity, or if I leave the room, or because that really helps you refresh, create that awareness and reset the mind.
That's beautiful. That's a concept that I really resonate with. There's this idea of it's called a liminal state or a liminal place, which is basically, if you were to look at a doorway, that any doorway that you walk through, whether it is something that is physically a doorway or emotionally or temporally a doorway, is that we're going from one state to another state, right?
Yes.
And that state in between, if we're unconscious of that, all kinds of things can happen. But like you're doing, you're taking a conscious effort to say, okay, well, I'm changing my state from being on a podcast to not being on a podcast. And as we learn how to create within that space, we can create the life that we want to be living.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is really what Financially Fit is all about. And it's living the secrets to an abundant and prosperous life. So you actually get to live everything that you've asked for in the way, the happiness, the peace, the love, the joy, the balance, the kindness, in the way that you desire.
Yes. And I love the way that what I hear now, as opposed to, when you're managing a $500 million financial portfolio, is that you have that $500 million portfolio, which, on the external looks great. It's something to pat yourself on the back for. But if you're not feeling great about it internally, it can cause all kinds of distress because your internal and your outside external aren't in alignment. Right. But what I'm hearing now is that you're living from a place of internal peace and happiness and joy. And so what is happening on the outside, on the external, whether things appear as a good day or a bad day, you're in a good place in order to be able to deal with it.
Right. And what you realize is some of the things that are external, especially in the financial world, are not within your realm of control. Because if you're in mutual funds, there's portfolio managers, there's stock managers, there's fund managers, there's Wall Street, there's all kinds of influences that go into that. So even if you have the very best mix for a client, there were so many external factors that nobody could control. But if the stock performed, everybody was happy. And if they didn't, it was the financial advisor's fault. And you're like, we had nothing to do with it outside of, based on what you said, this is the best match for you, but here are the risks. And so I find that so interesting with money, because there's a lot of things in the outside world where you don't have that control over. But if you can control how you feel on the inside, because you're an electromagnetic being, your energy, then money, which is the outside energy form, will match it and multiply and bring it to you. And that's the way we do it. And that's what I've seen for the last 25 years.
That's awesome. Like looking at some of the recent events that we've seen in the world, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening more locally, watching the gas prices go up and down, up, it is really could be really easy to get emotionally wrapped up in that and then not be able to operate at the level that we want to be operating. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say, I have, I'm sending all the peace I can send to the Ukraine, but in order for me to send anything to anybody else, I have to have it myself. In order for me to create financial well-being, then and be able to be generous with my finances, then I need to create that locally so that I can, then extend it globally.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely, because you cannot give or share, whether it's an emotional energy or in anything else, unless you have it within yourself. So it's taking all of those moments to making sure that you are always completely filled, so then you can share in everything. One of the things that I learned over these last, gosh, it was about 15 years ago. I had studied with a Buddhist monk for a little bit of time. And during one of the lessons, he had us stand up and get us, and he had us walk in a circle. And he said, "This is a metaphor for life." And we're like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "You guys were walking in a walking meditation. You were very mindful about how far you were in front of somebody, how far behind somebody you were, what was on the sides, the people and the noise outside." And he said, "This is how you are meant to live life." He
Hmm.
said, "It is to become the meditation. Meditation isn't something you do for 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. You become the meditation and you live there. So it's like becoming the prayer that you prayed." And it made sense. And it made so much sense. That's when I decided to really dive into meditation and learn a lot of things, because you can live in this state of being. And when you look at it from science, it's just an alteration of what brainwave pattern is predominant and strongest for you.
Hmm.
And it takes you out of that stressful, pressure, worry, fearful state, which we all experienced the last couple of years, and keeps you more at the peace and the balance, which keeps you filled up. And then you always have an abundance of energy, and money's energy. So money returns to you abundantly to share within the world.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah, and I like that analogy of the meditation, that
Mhm.
for me, meditation is about being present with where I am right now, right?
Yes.
It's so easy to, get hyper focused on the future or the past or whatever, but we can't
Mhm.
really, in the present moment, we can't do anything about the future. We can't do
Right.
anything about the past other than change our current experience of the future or the past.
Right. And how you feel in the moment that you are in creates your next moment, your next moment, and your
Mm,
next moment. So you're actively creating the future moment by moment. Now, to go out 2, 3 days to think about what that looks like, we're not there yet, but moment by moment, you're creating. And if you want something to look a certain way 2, 3 days from now, start in this moment to get there and
mm,
the way that you want to do it.
absolutely. So we've talked a lot about money, and without talking a lot about like the dollars and cents of money, that it's the more about the energy of money and the presence of money. Uh, and what I'm hearing is just like what you just said, that if we want to create an abundant future, don't worry so much about that future, worry about where you're at
Mhm.
right now. How do you create that chain of events such that the abundance you want to see in the future is being experienced right now? Is that
Mhm.
accurate?
Absolutely, it is, because we are creating. And if you want abundance and if you want prosperity, yes, there's one thing to think about: I'm abundant and I'm prosperous. But if you don't feel it in the heart space, that other 90%, you can think it all day long, but what the universe is going to return to you, what's in the heart space. So you can think I'm abundant and prosperous, but if you feel less than and a lack energy, the universe is going to return to you a less than and a lack energy, because that
Mm,
90% is stronger than what you're thinking. How many
mm,
times do we think, I'm going to win the lottery? And yet you don't feel like you're worthy and deserving to win the lottery. So you never win the lottery. Well, what
mm,
happens with our body and our energy field is, when we are in a heightened state, the I'm worthy, I'm deserving, I'm enough, which those words overlap the financial services world, our energy field extends out and it goes really, really far. And then when you're in that lack energy or anger or frustration, it condenses down and keeps you really closed off and condenses. And that's what goes into the physical body. And
mm,
so if you're thinking I'm rich and abundant, but you have stress, worry, and pressure, your energy field is closed off. It's next to you, and it's a misalignment. So what we have to do is align what we feel in the heart space and recode that part of our brain to the software program to what we're thinking. And then we can have instant results 100% of the time.
Mm. So what I'm hearing is, rather than, I mean, a lot of times when we do affirmations and so forth, you know, we restate or recite these ideas, but if we're coming from the head space rather than from the heart space, we're not going to, those affirmations aren't going to be as effective,
right,
as if we were to start from the heart place and operate outward from there.
Right.
Which is so interesting how different that it is from the way that we typically work. I mean, back when I was in that corporate environment, in a toxic environment, I was basically working for the next vacation, right? That when I get to that point, then my heart will be happy, you know, because I won't have to be doing what I'm doing right now. Right. Whereas if I had been able to change that order of events and say, okay, well, how can I feel happy right now? And then not only do I experience the joy of doing where I am right now. That is not to say keep doing the things that are, I mean, if you're hitting yourself with a hammer, stop hitting yourself with a hammer. But tune into how you're feeling and then worry about the sequence of events after that.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Because you want that alignment on the inside. Our words overlap a lot with the financial services world. And our society has placed such a huge emphasis on creating of outward money that it started taking over who we are as a divine being. And I was seeing patterns with people, and it didn't matter what we worked on. If certain feelings on the inside internally change, their money supply always increased. And this was one of the tips that made me really started thinking over the last several years what we really are doing as energy beings. And so in the financial services world, we say things like, here's your net worth. Here's your portfolio value. Your assets appreciated. Oh, do you have enough money to fund XYZ goal? And on the inside, clients were like, well, I just want to know that I'm worthy and that someone loved me and I was appreciated and my parents valued me and that I was enough for them. And often, if you didn't feel like you were enough on the inside, you didn't have enough money on the outside to fund your goals. And so it's just kind of like putting gas in your car. Your car takes a certain type of gas. It might be unleaded, it might be premium, it might be diesel. You might have an electric car or a hybrid car. They all take different types of fuel. And your emotions and feelings are that fuel to the thought. So if we hold that thought, I'm rich and abundant, but the fuel that we give it is stress and worry, guess what's going to come back to you? Stress and worry, because the universe is going to return that because it's stronger, because it's an emotional feeling. And so that's what I mean. And this is some of the principles and things I talk about in Financially Fit, because it's really aligning the heart space with what you're thinking, because all healing is a matter of the heart.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Dawna, for sharing your heart with us as a hero of the heart. And how can our audience, and I know we could talk forever about all of this. How can our audience get in touch with you so they can continue the conversation?
The easiest way here in the United States is just go to actually on your cell phone, you go to your text messages and type in the word abundance to the number 26786. It's a 5-digit phone number, but when you type the word abundance to that, it will connect you to my website and all of my social media and allow you to schedule a personal consultation call if that's what you choose, to see how you can become more financially fit.
That's brilliant. So 26786 abundance.
Yep. Type the word abundance. Yes.
Beautiful. Simple.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Dawna. I appreciate all that you've shared. And to our audience, until our stories meet again